Hey folks, welcome to the first ever episode of the Unpacked podcast. I'm Viggy.
And I'm James.
And we're excited to bring this to you. The motivation for us to do this was there's a lot of news in the world of tech and tech adjacent things where there's a lot of coverage at a more surface level without peeling a lot of different layers. And a few weeks back, I started writing the Unpacked Substack where I pick a topic once a week and kind of dive deep into it in what I hope is a fairly analytical way. And we're trying to bring a similar approach to this in a more conversational format through this podcast.
And to the conversational aspect of that, Vicky and I have worked together and have broken down complex problems together. And I think the goal here is to take a similar approach, laying out the different pieces we see in a complex topic for you to develop an informed opinion. And we'll sprinkle in some of our own takes as well.
Yeah, I'm excited, James. With that, let's dive into the first topic of the podcast. Let's talk about what is maybe a semi-hot button topic, the whole Zoom fiasco, about how they changed their terms behind the scenes and people got a little bit mad about it. So let's maybe dive in. James, you want to give a little bit of context? Like, do you want to set it up?
Yeah, so I think it was when I was looking to the background on the subject, the terms of service changed in March, I think, and it was kind of recently in July that over the weekend, I guess, someone was interested in Zoom's terms of service. I don't know who reads those things, unless someone was doing some sort of research. And in the terms of service, it said they had, I don't have the exact words, but they had like the rights to use customer content, I think was the phrase, something like that. Yeah,
I'm just pulling that up.
For use in their AI models or something.
So I think they had a couple of sections in their contract. One was, it's called the Permitted Users and Customer License Grant. And then there was another one which was kind of about like how service generated data is used. But I think basically they made their language kind of super open-ended where it said something to the tune of like they can do whatever the hell they want with customer data. And it pointed to like a very vague privacy statement, which was like second linked from the terms page. But essentially, I think the way that they had written it was they could do what they want with customer data. And that includes training for like, AI training.
And so it was broad, but also the other thing was opting out, right? Sorry to cut you off there, but it's like it was broad usage and there was no way to opt out.
There was no way to opt out. Yep, that's right. So I think this happened, the particular reporting around this happened on this August 6th by this like, I don't know how famous they are. It's called Stack Diary. I looked up the traffic. It's like 500,000 people go to this website a month.
Is it a blog or news or?
I think it's more like a blog that covers a bunch of like, they have a few different topics around like, web dev, design, AI and stuff. So it seems kind of semi-blog, semi-news article related. And these guys picked it up on the 6th of August. Someone picked it up and then retweeted the story and it got like pretty viral. So it's kind of interesting to see like what happened after that, right? Do you want to kind of maybe narrate like what was the sequence of events after this got picked up?
You might have to interject because I might not have them all right.
All right. So let me take a stab at this. So basically, August 6th, this article gets published on Stack Diary. On August 7th, somebody finds this, tweets this out, goes pretty viral. Zoom goes in like full damage control mode, and interestingly, like what they did was publish this blog article on the Zoom blog, which kind of said something to the tune of like, hey, these changes, like, don't worry about them. By the way, here are a couple of specific examples of features where, we do use data for like training. And one is the meeting summary feature where, if you're like sign up for this particular feature, they will give you like a summary of what came out of the meeting after the meeting.
Which is, it's like, I think I remember a transcription feature in Zoom I was impressed by that was able to transcribe, but this is an evolution of that. It summarizes the transcript.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, I think they're kind of branding this as like Zoom IQ as like the broad umbrella for like what they're trying to do. And then I think they had one more feature which had something to do with like automatic. Zoom has some kind of a Slack type product, and they have like an auto draft of replies. So these were like the two Zoom IQ features that they talked about. And Zoom basically on their blog said something to the tune of like, hey, like, yeah, it looks like our privacy policy is a little bit loose, but like, hey, in reality, we're not doing any of this. And I think a little bit of their misstep was probably that where they landed was their privacy policies that they could do whatever the hell they want. And then they had their blog, which is like, oh, we could do whatever the hell we want, but we're not actually doing it. We're only using this for like two specific things. And then that was followed by an actual change in their privacy policy, and they now have a line in their policy.
Real quick.
Yeah.
So just for the timeline, you said the article was published on the 6th. You talked about how on the 7th they're in damage control mode. So the 6th was a Sunday. 7th is a Monday, so you can see Zoom was actually at work on Monday, and then now they're doing more stuff to cover themselves. I guess multiple things are happening on the 7th.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's pretty spot on. So finally, it looks like they did make a correction to their terms, right? And the terms now explicitly has something which says to the tune of like, Zoom does not use any of your audio, video, chat, screen sharing, blah, 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 to train Zoom or third-party artificial intelligence models. Right, so this is like super damage control mode. Their CEO on the August 8th, which I guess was a Tuesday, he makes a LinkedIn post where he's like, hey, this was like a misfire on, Zoom's part. It was a process failure is what he says, and that they're fixing this immediately.
Yeah, process failure sounds like company speak for we're looking for an excuse. I wonder, I guess not everyone makes a decision around every decision at a company, and so I don't know what process you have to check your license terms, or I don't know. I wonder what process failed, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess in like all fairness to Zoom, they did course correct pretty quickly. It's like August 6th was the first published, 7th is like when this went popular. And then I think this whole issue was resolved by like August 11th, which is a pretty impressive, at least they didn't try to save face. They were like, we screwed up and this is the solution, which I think is, probably like pretty commendable for them.
I mean, and also maybe some implication there could be that, if it was super important to them, they probably would have doubled down, right? There's probably some amount of, if they really wanted it and it's so core to their business, they wouldn't have given it up, or they would have, wouldn't have been so, what's the word, explicit in their terms of saying, we do not use this to train models.
That's a good point.
Hand-waved.
Yeah. So like, let's take a step back. I know, James, you did a little bit of digging. Like, what is, like, lay this out for us. Like, what is where does Zoom fit in today? Like, what does the competitor landscape look like? I know they've had kind of a pretty tough time competing against like Google and Microsoft Teams, which has been a pretty serious competitor for them.
Yeah, I could maybe start with a comparison and then maybe bring it back and talk about how Zoom describes their customers in their earnings letter.
Yeah.
So, everyone's first thought of video conferencing at work is probably whichever company you currently work at, what they use as a tool. Where I work, we use Google Meets. So for me, I only ever end a Zoom call if we're talking to another company and they use Zoom.
We're always complaining about it.
You're never set up. You have some weird name in Zoom because you one time had a phone call with friends or something. But yeah, so you kind of talked about like who in my mind are like the main competitors on video conferencing or like kind of workspace stuff, which is Google Workspace is I guess their brand, and Microsoft, which is Microsoft 365.
Yeah.
Right? And they have different pricing tiers. It seems like the different pricing tiers for their visible online stuff, excluding their enterprise pricing tiers.
But like, what's your initial read on them? Like, is Zoom, more or less expensive? They have like more or less features. Like, where does kind of Zoom fit in this competitive landscape?
Yeah, well, frankly, when we were talking prior, I was the way I expressed it was like, who the hell is paying for Zoom? Because Zoom offers some general office things, or
Yeah.
like email and calendar as part of their video conferencing and chat, which you mentioned earlier. But they obviously, you never heard of them offering other things like some sort of word processor or slides. I think I remember seeing in their investor press they're working on it, but eventually we can all bask in the glory of Zoom docs. But for now they don't have it. And price wise, imagine there's 3 tiers online, available online, not including the enterprise kind of sales aspect. And Zoom's bottom tier matches up price wise similar to where Google and Microsoft's middle tiers match up.
Interesting. So basically, they're charging about the same amount of money, but going against essentially like Google and Google Workspace and Microsoft 365, which has, pretty insane amount of like distribution power.
Yeah, and I would even say Microsoft and Google probably more in a competition with themselves, but they're like significantly undercutting Zoom by it's like half the price. 70
essentially bundling something for free, which is Zoom is selling as a separate product.
Yeah, exactly. And Google offers like more storage, and Microsoft's like, we got desktop apps. But in general, that's kind of, Zoom's expensive, and I feel like you don't get much bang for your buck. But if you're folks at your company like their video software.
Yeah, I do feel like there's probably people who actually feel pretty passionately about Zoom. So I get why that would work.
Yeah, another anecdote we had earlier was how maybe Zoom's like the power user version of a video conferencing software, and the other ones are kind of like afterthoughts. Yeah. And you might compare that to like Excel being the original spreadsheet software and powerful. And how you can do, people might be used to the macros and the key bindings there, and
that makes sense.
They feel out of place in Google Sheets.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess it makes sense that like Zoom kind of needs to go aggressive with something like generative AI features, where they want to continue having like a more differentiated like product experience.
Yeah, they're seeing competition on that, on the generative AI things. I think, and I forget the name of their conferences, but both Microsoft and Google announced, look at all this stuff that will automatically, it will make you super lazy at work, and your boss will think they're talking to you because we're generating these slide decks and messages for you.
That's so wild. What is, I know you looked into this, James, like so when I think about Zoom, I always kind of maybe assumed it's like there are more people who kind of use it for like side gig kind of purposes, and then maybe there's also like enterprise customers. Like what does the distribution look like?
Yeah, they categorize it in 2 ways in their most recent earnings things. They describe part of it as online, and that's people who sign up for Zoom via their website kind of on a self-serve basis. Like, hey, I need video conferencing and I don't mind, I really want Zoom, so I'm going to pay their expensive price. And then they categorize anyone who buys their product via their sales force. Like there's a request more info, sales form on their website, or they also say they put it into channel partners, so other people selling for them, or they might have independent software vendors. I don't know what the breakdown of these different categories are, but they bundle all those together as enterprise customers. Yep. Which we have to be careful. Enterprise customers is just their word for it. Doesn't necessarily mean they're a certain size or not.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I think if I remember correctly, you said it's roughly like 50-50 enterprise and non-enterprise.
A little bit more, like 57% enterprise on a revenue basis. Yeah. In their most recent earnings. And they have some other breakdowns to try to give their investors a sense of like, well, how much these enterprise customers, they're not necessarily a certain size. Well, how can we give investors some insight on like, are we just beholden to a few whale companies, or is it a good spread? So it's it's not a. They have over thousands of customers.
Yep, got it. And then if I, based on what we dug in, it looks like the contract changes only apply to like the non-enterprise part of it, because I'm guessing, enterprise customers aren't agreeing to like online terms.
Yeah, that exactly that. I felt in fact, the LinkedIn post from Zoom CEO, that was the most, felt the least like a company PR speak in his post. Was he said pretty clearly that these change in terms applied to Zoom online customers.
Yeah,
so again, the self-serve I signed up on the website, and that the enterprise customers have a different agreement. Probably still similar from customer to customer, but they'll have a separate agreement that presumably their customers' legal teams should have seen that and then and said, no, we don't agree to that component. So I think that while still 50% ish on a revenue basis of Zoom's customers were affected by this terms change, it does I think put into perspective of who would have been really impacted by them training on this data. It wouldn't be like a large company with trade secrets. It might be a small company with trade secrets. That to me, it seems like a lesser impact when it's.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I guess I can see why 60% of your business is coming from enterprises, and you are getting this like insane PR storm of privacy risk. You probably want to quash it pretty quickly before you freak out your customers.
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine the CEO probably was getting phone calls from friends that work high up at other companies and asking what the hell the deal was. But the whole time they had different terms, and when you're a decision maker, you don't necessarily know. Oh, we have a separate contract for everything, and so
that's true.
Probably was a shitstorm for him.
So this brings up an interesting question. Like as companies start thinking more and more about building features that might be more AI based or like generative AI based, like there's probably like an intricate balance of like how do you actually have enough data to train these features and kind of the ability to use the data that's available to you versus also kind of being thoughtful about what your customers care about. So that's an interesting challenge that this one brought up, and I'm kind of thinking about like what is the right line.
Yeah, I agree. It's I think some things you see in some places is you get something back for the data you're letting being used for ML model training.
So like basically some sort of like a quid pro quo.
Yeah, exactly. Like
right?
I think the example you brought up when we chatted about this originally was Shopify audiences, where if you want to be able to advertise against Shopify, people that are buying stuff on Shopify across Shopify, regardless of which merchant, you as a merchant need to give your data or the data that happens with interactions with your merchant site so that you can benefit from advertising against people who interact with other merchant sites. Yeah,
that's a really fascinating idea. I mean, just so we like get this right. So it's like you're an SMB, let's say you have, like a ski gear store or whatever, and then you sell a bunch of stuff. You have, emails of customers that have actually bought from you, and so does like another outdoor gear store. And now essentially both of you kind of saying like, hey, here's my Shopify, here's my data, here's people that I'm telling you are interested in my gear because they bought with me, and so does the other SMB merchant, and essentially they're kind of pooling this data, and now Shopify knows that, hey, here's like a few tens of thousands of people that are actually interested in that gear.
Yeah, I think that's a good description. And theoretically, Shopify is providing this service to these customers anyway. There's unlikely that this small gear company, outdoor sports company would be able to build their own AI model to infer based on some contextual behavior or like ingest some sort of external signal to run good marketing. I think it's a clear value add from Shopify. Which I wonder, can we apply that same lens to Zoom, right? So you gave the examples earlier about them using this training to improve their Zoom IQ was the brand for their AI initiatives.
Yeah.
What do you think about? Is the customer getting enough out of that feature for them to be able to be offering up their content?
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess there's also a question of like how much of this needs to be explicit versus not. Like I know in Zoom's case, they probably responded pretty aggressively where it's like, hey, here's like a checkbox. You can like uncheck it when you like sign up for this feature. But is there a line of like, should there be certain circumstances when it's okay for companies to actually like use this data? Like we talked about the example of like Gmail Smart Compose, for example, right? Like let's say you are a Google Workspace enterprise customer, you use Gmail, there's a Smart Compose feature, and it probably makes sense for Google to actually like look at how people are using Smart Compose and like, train their Smart Compose models or something like that better. So yeah, that's probably like an interesting line there of what's okay and not.
I mean, which is, I'd say, argue would be almost what Zoom presumably would be doing. Is one of the features they call out is a similar Smart Compose aspect. And, and I think I guess the opt out is important. It seems. I think it was pretty clear about all the backlash in the news is as they try to change the terms as quickly as possible, they try to outline, the opt-out's there. Don't forget to use the opt-out. But I guess there's maybe some sort of cultural expectation that we want to be able to opt out from these AI features. I think maybe one thing in the background is, like, we'll see if this podcast lasts 20, 30 years, but I'm sure AI is it's a very hot topic right now, and it's probably evolved a lot over the years, but these are kind of like early days in an AI wave. We've had previous AI waves, but this is this one, and it's new to all of us. And so what's okay and what's not. These could be a little bit of an overreaction. That's
true. I think it would definitely be interesting to see, like, are there specific types of companies which are more proactive about it? Like maybe as a B2B SaaS company, you probably need to be a lot more conservative about how you're using customer data. Both of us like worked in like ad tech a bunch. Like we've definitely seen situations where nobody is voluntarily giving up data, especially like like Facebook Pixel, or like Google, for example, had this Pixel, which is this piece of code that fires whenever a user buys a transaction on like a particular website or something. And for the longest time, Google would essentially like pool this data. Like the default was that the default was that Google can use the data from any customer that uses this pixel.
Any business that was using Google for advertising
exactly
would have the data that happened on their site, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, let's say Macy's had a Google Pixel and then Nordstrom had a Google Pixel. Google would essentially like suck in all of this data, and kind of quid pro quo was like, hey, we just take your data by default. And then the only reason they actually changed this recently through like something called restricted data processing is because the California law kicked in, which essentially kind of forced their hand in having to give, advertisers that control. So it's probably like an interesting dichotomy of companies where maybe in the B2B SaaS world, there's a more proactive approach about this, whereas in a lot of other types of companies, there isn't.
Yeah, certainly. I think one of the first ways or first framings you and I brainstormed about this issue was, is there a difference between B2B and B2C, which is what you were just describing.
Right. Yeah.
And I think what I liked about you referring to ad tech is it's a little more fuzzy when it comes to consumers, but consumers don't understand the amount of value they get out of having ad-supported products, where a business can make a reasonable amount of money off an ad-supported product, and you as a user most likely don't want to pay the amount that they pay. And I think everyone's experiencing that right now with price hikes for streaming services is the go-to example. Is as the ad tiers are coming in, they're realizing how much money they can make off the ad tiers, and so they're trying to push people to ad tiers or pay up. And so I think there's a little bit of that where as a consumer, from the B2C standpoint, you're getting the value of your favorite streaming service, quote unquote, for free because you see some ads, and the only way to do that ads is via processing your data. So on the B2B aspect, what's the quid pro quo? What's acceptable? It feels a little bit, weird to me. I don't know what the right words are that you would have an ad-supported business product. That's fair. I think we're used to like a business needs to pay, a consumer is trying to get something free, and that's true. Probably because there's price sensitivity in consumers, and businesses are busy making their money elsewhere and just want something that works.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder if there's like specific types of features where it feels like less intrusive. Like in the case of Zoom, it's like your voice, your video, which probably feels like more invasive for someone to just take that and train on it, versus, Smart Compose on Gmail probably feels like less of a privacy invasion.
Yeah, there's definitely a visceral human, like,
Yeah.
let's say, lizard brain reaction to my voice, my image. No, but like, you know, the BS email you're writing your boss or a colleague, like it wasn't anything special in the end.
That's true. Cool. So let's wrap this up. So maybe, you know, what's your takeaways from this? I can take a stab at it, but like, go for it.
I guess from my perspective, I think I found after I dug in, I felt a little like it was no big deal. I think that
I think that's a fair take.
I expressed it earlier when I was saying that it was only applying to online customers.
Yeah.
You know, so these are by definition likely small. Like even some of Zoom's enterprise, what they classify as enterprise. Remember, you know, scroll back and listen to how I described that. I feel like some of those enterprise customers are fairly small as well. And so to me, it seems like a non-issue that like a self-serve, you know, ostensibly business product, but really not too dissimilar for how you sign up to a consumer product, where you're kind of beholden to the company's standard terms. They change the terms, you get an email about it, you know, like pay attention if it's really important to you. I feel like not too big of an issue. Theoretically, this is going to apply to like, you know, to quote unquote real businesses, which probably isn't fair to all the people that are affected by it. But I think to me, it seems like a less of a big deal when I found out that component. Yeah,
I think that's a fair take. Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think I was pretty impressed by the rate at which they like responded to this and actually like owned up the mistake, and then they were like, "Hey, here's what we're doing to fix it." And I definitely think that there's some like interesting takeaways. We'll probably see more and more of this come up with these kind of features coming up, where we'll probably see like a diversity of approaches coming, where maybe the Shopify audiences example we talked about, where there's maybe a more explicit quid pro quo versus, you know, the Smart Compose example, where maybe there's a more implicit quid pro quo and like less visceral reaction, so people are okay with giving access to that data. And it'll be interesting to see how this landscape evolves.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.